Welcome to Intimacy After the Pandemic, a discussion about the Lost Key film by Ricardo Adler, who is here with us this evening. You can see him on the screen. My name is Whitney Perez, and I'll be your panel moderator for this evening as we embark on a question and answer forum where our panelists will answer your most intimate questions, about everything from how the film can be applied to your day-to-day life, to post-pandemic sexuality, and pillow talk, of course. We've brought together a really incredible group of experts for you. But before we introduce them, we just want to take a moment and thank our generous sponsor, 26 Sushi and Tapas in Miami, Florida, and our wonderful anonymous donors, without whom we really could not have this event. Thank you all for your support and generosity. Now I think it's probably my pleasure to introduce tonight's special guests. Let me kick things off and first welcome Dr. Carolina Pataky. She's a clinical sexologist and licensed marriage and family counselor. Her practice, the Love Discovery Institute in Miami, offers a variety of traditional and non-traditional counseling for individuals and couples. So don't be shy with your questions for her. You can get to know her and her team of counselors better by visiting lovediscovery.org and or following her on Instagram at Carolina Pataky. Carolina, say hi.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'm so looking forward to tonight's event and all the questions that may come up tonight.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right, next, let's welcome Bari Lyman. She's also based in South Florida, and she's the founder of the Meet to Marry method, which is a program designed to help singles choicefully find their soulmates and stop settling for anything short of true love. Her program has been featured on top dating sites like Match.com and JDate, on news outlets like Fox and Self. If you're ready to share it, visit meettomarry.com or facebook.com/meettomarry. And you can even get to know some of the couples that she's helped bring together on her website. So thank you and welcome, Bari.
Thank you so much, Whitney. I'm so excited to be here. We're going to have a great conversation tonight about finding your soulmate and about thriving in your soulmate relationship. So thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right. And now it's my honor to introduce Rabbi Manis Friedman. He is a Torah scholar, marriage counselor, and of course, rabbi. He's probably the first rabbi you'll be taking sex advice from. He's founder of It's Good to Know, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing the Torah's ancient wisdom to a modern and really global audience. He's in New York, where he has a pretty big and loyal following. And if you want to learn more about his teachings, please visit itsgoodtoknow.org or find him on facebook.com/manisfreedom. He's also on Instagram and Facebook, the whole bit. Rabbi, thank you so much for being here this evening.
It's going to be a pleasure. We're going straight into questions rather than speeches. This is like...
I think last, we just want to welcome the filmmaker who brought The Lost Key to life, Ricardo Adler. He wrote, directed, and starred in The Lost Key. This is his third film. He's based in Jerusalem, where he's working on The Lost Key Part 2. So maybe we'll get a little sneak preview of that tonight. Ricardo, thank you for this inspiring film, and thank you for sharing your journey here tonight.
Thank you, Whitney. Thanks everybody for signing up. I want to thank the sponsors as well. To the restaurant 26 Sushi and Tapas in Miami, where I've actually been to personally, and it's really good. And the several anonymous donors who supported this event. Thank you very much. And by the way, I'm in Jerusalem because of the corona. I still live in Venezuela, but we came here for my son's bar mitzvah. Then we couldn't go back, and I've been here for over a year. So that's why I'm in Jerusalem at the moment. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. All right.
Exiled in Jerusalem. That for a twist.
The final destination.
Absolutely. All right, without further ado, I'd say let's get into it. Just as a reminder to the guests attending tonight, the YouTube channel comments will be closed during our discussion, but we'll be taking all of your questions via email. So to submit a question, it will be totally anonymous. I'll be the only person seeing it. Simply shoot your email to tlkeventquestions@gmail.com. Again, those will be completely anonymous, and then I'll pass them on to the panelists. We'll periodically flash that email up on the screen, and I'll remind you from time to time so you don't miss out. Again, submit a question, just email tlkeventquestions@gmail.com. All right, so let's kick things off first with a question for Rabbi Friedman. Rabbi Friedman, you touch on this a little bit in the film, but I'd love to ask you to elaborate. I think many of us have this preconceived notion that talking to a rabbi about sex is totally taboo. I know I did before I watched the film. Can you tell us a little bit more about why talking about sex more openly, especially in a spiritual context, is important?
It is important. I think it's a crisis, really. Traditionally, intimacy dictated that the subject needs to be treated modestly. And modesty meant you don't talk about it in public, which is really a good idea. It's not dinner table conversation. And it shouldn't be casual conversation. But I think we went a little too far, and we don't talk about it at all, which means we're not sharing the wisdom. So people have to go to secular sources, to Hollywood, to find out what intimacy is or what married life is, and that's obviously a disaster. So we do want to be modest about it. We want to be delicate about it because it deserves that kind of respect, but not numb. No secrets. So even though it's not traditional to do this publicly in a public forum, but I think that times demand it and that it would be cruel not to.
That's really interesting, Carolina, because I think a lot of times we might want to, let's say, talk about how do you bring up this topic without offending? Carolina, I don't know if that question came through.
Whitney,
how might we talk about?
You cut out for a bit, almost the whole question.
Sorry about that. Carolina, if we have an intimate topic that we want to discuss with our partners, as Rabbi Friedman was talking about, how do we broach the topic without worrying about offending?
Yeah, sorry, Whitney, I didn't hear you the first time. So yeah, I think it's important in relationships to really learn how to create a sacred, safe space between you and your partner. And so in creating that sacred, safe, non-judgmental space, we do this by first inviting our partner into a conversation. And so sometimes our partner, it's not the right time, or sometimes they've already planned something, they're doing something else. So if something's really important to us, and intimacy talk is certainly important. So we need to be able to say, you know what, is this a good time to talk about X, Y, and Z, being specific about what versus I want to talk about something that's important. And so first you want to invite your partner into that sacred, safe, non-judgmental space. And I continue to say sacred, safe, non-judgmental space because we need to learn to create that. Often we start judging ourselves or we start judging our partner if we're not necessarily hearing the response we want. So we first have to create that inviting space. We invite them into the space. We schedule it if we need to, if that moment's not a good moment for them. So when we do talk about it, we want to take the pressure off and remove expectations. So this serves the purpose to sharing with your partner your inner world. Your inner world could be sharing with them something that you've had in your mind or a movie that plays out for you. This may be sharing with your partner something that you want to around your erotic world or around your emotional world. And when you do this, you also want to make statements such as, what I envision is, or say things like, what I'd like, or what I'd wish for, or what I desire. Stay away from blaming and criticism, such as, I know you don't like, but I've been meaning to try or wanting to try, because that goes into criticism, or saying things, generalizations as, well, you never do, but I've been wanting. So you want to stay present to your wishes, your wants, your desires. And finally, remember that if your partner doesn't agree, or is not comfortable with maybe your desire, what you're wanting to do, that it doesn't mean that he or she doesn't love you. They may not be ready or comfortable with the request, but when their discomfort is met with love, acceptance, and understanding, this can be incredibly transformative in itself. So you certainly want to be able to create, again, like I mentioned, that sacred, safe space, which means it has to be non-judgmental and allowing yourself to share your thoughts in your emotional or erotic world, but also allowing space for your partner, where it's okay for your partner to say, you know what, right now I don't have an answer. Can I come back to you with an answer?
Great. Thanks, Carolina. That's great insight. And we just got a question in our inbox that really ties into this. Ricardo, I think it's for you. Our guest asks, I'm married and I want to know Ricardo's opinion regarding his experience applying these secrets to marriage and intimacy.
Well, thank God it's been good. Otherwise, I would have a problem with this film being out there. First of all, as I was making the film with Rabbi Friedman, who we did this together for many years, I learned about a lot of these things while I was making the film, and we were starting to apply them again as I was making the film over the years. It took us 7 years to make this film, but it's a process that never ends. Intimacy is related to infinity as well. Is related to God. When you bring God into your intimacy, into your relationship, then it never ends. You can always go higher, deeper and deeper with your couple. And so, thank God, yes, it's worked out very well for us. It's not only the topics that are in the film, but there's other practices that are in the Lost Key Part 2, which I'll discuss briefly in a moment. And the whole package just helps to strengthen and to solidify the intimacy over time. So now that doesn't mean that it's been perfect. Everybody has their challenges, and there are one or two things which if somebody insists, I'll answer. but there are some things that are more challenging for some people than others, especially if you come from a different mindset. But in general, it's helped us a lot. And I would say it's even helped us, it's carried us through some difficult times as well. So, because if your intimacy is healthy, then it helps the rest of the relationship as well.
And Bari, what about those folks who aren't happily coupled or haven't yet found their besheret? How do you feel the Lost Key translates to your meet to marry approach?
Yeah, so basically how we date and how we prepare, how prepared we are to find our soulmate sets us up is what sets us up really for ultimate success. Because let's face it, the lost key is totally about connection. It's not conventional wisdom. It's divine wisdom. And so when we approach dating from a pure vision that's different than conventional wisdom, the idea is that the man is the one who is in this role of giving, and the woman is in this role of receiving. But today it's really sad, like how most people date. They're not set up for success because of the things that they're looking for when they're dating. So people are looking for things like, did I have a good time? Do I like you? And sometimes it's sadly superficial. Even in the religious world today, people are looking at some superficial things like a checklist. Did he go to Harvard? Is he educated? Do they wear certain kinds of yarmulke? Things like that, only to discover that the things that they looked for did not create real connection, did not create real intimacy. So in order to create this oneness and this best friendship, this connection that translates into a lifetime marriage, the dating has to come from a totally different mindset. And that mindset really has to be one of clarity from within. And instead of looking for like superficial external things, it really needs to come from, how do I feel when I'm with you? And that mindset really fosters tremendous emotional intimacy. And when dating is based on meaningful conversations that are truly vulnerable and authentic, you're set up for those physical intimacy conversations, and that connectedness for a lifetime.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Bari. We have a lot of questions coming into our inbox. So thank you everyone who's submitting questions, comments. One of the questions that seems to be reoccurring in our inbox is, why are we focusing specifically on intimacy after the pandemic? How does this all connect? And I think that could be for anyone. So Rabbi Friedman, I think maybe we can kick it off with you, and then if anybody else wants to jump in and share their thoughts, that would be great.
Well, hopefully the quarantining and the lockdowns and people spending a lot of time at home forced us to rethink what intimacy is all about. I mean, can you imagine, like, when we first heard that there's going to be a quarantine? Do you remember the panic? We're going to be stuck in the house together? That's not doable. We're not going to survive. Get the body bags, And also with kids. We're going to have the kids home? This is horrible. But looking back at it now, it's really scary. That was the reality we were living in. The thought of spending time with your own spouse was frightening. Being home with your own children was unthinkable. Do the kids know this? Do your children know that you dread the thought of being home with them for more than 6 hours in a row? This is not healthy. In fact, this is really frighteningly unhealthy. So hopefully we've matured, and we don't want to go back to that again. So now we realize there's got to be more to the relationship than there was, and the good starting point is in the bedroom, in the intimacy department. But also, it's not really connected to the question. We're going to be talking about intimacy and about sexuality and so on. But really, we shouldn't isolate it from the rest of life. It's not a subject. It's life. It's not algebra. This is life. This is how you live. This is how you raise children. This is why we're here in the first place. So it's got to fit in with the rest of your life. It can't be, like sitting down with your kids to have the talk. That's not healthy. Why is this different than anything else? Why don't you have the talk about what to serve for dinner? You say, would you like this? Yes, no, okay. We shouldn't isolate the subject and make it sound like some strange and different, scary, mysterious. It's life, and we got to live life. So let's not make it too specialized.
I'll jump in. I noticed too that for the singles during the pandemic, being so isolated has made a lot of people rethink, what am I doing? Do I really want to be by myself? Do I really want to be so independent? Do I really want to be so strong? Or do I really want to take down those walls and barriers to having true intimacy? That maybe intimacy, like Rabbi Friedman was saying, isn't some taboo thing, but maybe it's something that's really natural, that if I think differently about it and I approach it differently, that everything in my life can be fully integrated and I can have everything I want, including an amazing sex life. And speaking personally, I was someone that dated all the wrong people for so many years, and it was very lonely and it was very isolating. But when you come to sex as a spiritual thing, as a divine union, as something so special with one person for the rest of your life, wow, there's nothing better. There really isn't anything better. And so love, instead of being this idea of, how people joke around about marriage and ball and chain and all this awful stuff, your husband, your wife is your best friend, is home. And when we've been alone for so long or in unhealthy relationships, when we think of it differently and we look at what this film is presenting about giving, true giving and receiving, it's just very, very powerful. And it's something that no one should miss out on.
I think it's true that you're good at dating. You're probably not good at marriage. And if you really want to get married, you're probably not a good date.
One of our guests actually asked a question about that specific concept. She said that she's married and that, she's been taught that intimacy is often, necessary to have this deep love and passion, but that over the years, she and her husband grew apart and spent less time together. But now, every time she enters into an intimate setting, she feels less excited. She feels nervous and pressured to make her husband happy and doesn't always have a good time. So her question is, how do I undo this huge mess now? Carolina, maybe you want to tackle that one. That feels like your domain there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I first want to explain a little bit about intimacy. So with intimacy and its various domains, which intimacy is composed of a variety of facets, spiritual intimacy, emotional intimacy, sexual intimacy are three of the main ones. And so when we're trying to connect at an intimate level with another, and we really have to learn how to share our innermost selves. And this is where the fear of intimacy comes up and starts to surface for most. So when the rabbi talked, for example, about what a lot of individuals started experiencing through lockdown at the beginning of pandemic, which was that fear of, well, what am I going to do now at home with my partner, with my kids? That was a little bit of this higher levels of consciousness coming up for them around, we've been living parallel lives, but now there is a discomfort that starts to surface within us that doesn't allow me to connect with my partner, and I don't even know where to begin. And I don't have the escapes that maybe I had that I'm so comfortable with. And so individuals often do experience the excitement at the beginning of their relationship. And this could last anywhere between 6 months to 2 years, give and take, because during that time, there are those chemicals that are being released with excitement that are really fogging up some of those deeper wounds that we carry within ourselves. And so when we're able to start moving forward in a relationship past that space where we're just in the excitement stage of the relationship, this is where we could really enter into the relationship as a vehicle of healing and growth, where we could really start the adulting process of our inner child, where we're able to start also learning these aspects of ourselves, how to heal those aspects of ourselves, along with being able to more deeply connect with our partner, which is maybe some of the tools that we didn't learn from our primary caregivers, from the home that we grew up in. So this is actually, I think, the golden space for a relationship, where individuals do start beating themselves up about maybe the way they're showing up or things that they're noticing that continues to come up for them. But this is really where the gold lies for you, when you're able to say, you know what, I'm noticing these things, I'm becoming aware of these things within me that are surfacing now. I'm able to notice the themes, that this is something that's happened before. So now you're able to do something about it, and you're able to start paying attention, but you're also being able to start learning how to accept these feelings, being able to learn, where are these feelings coming from? When was the first time I felt this way? What was going on in my life? What was I being told? And then from there, what needs to look different? How do I allow my partner into what I'm experiencing and what's going on within me? And that really starts to create deeper levels of intimacy.
That's wonderful. One kind of related to that, do you or any of the other panelists, two separate people have asked, believe there's only one soulmate, one ideal partner for everyone out there? Or do you think that there are second chances built in, that divorce can ignite a truer, deeper intimacy? What about people looking for that round two?
Rabbi Friedman?
Every marriage is divinely orchestrated, because marriage means a reunion of parts of a single soul. The soul that gets divided can reunite through marriage. If it wasn't the same soul, then you only create a union, but not a reunion, and that's not a marriage. So every marriage is a match made in heaven, whether it's the first, the second, or the third, etc. So every marriage is a soul mate. And soulmate means you're reuniting a male and female component of one single soul that was one. And now it's becoming one again through the marriage. So it's very likely that the second marriage, which was destined to be the second, could be much more mature, much more satisfying, much more stable. The first one maybe was more exciting, maybe too exciting, maybe too challenging, but no marriage is a mistake. No.
Ricardo, you talked a little bit about your experience feeling bored prior to finding this deep intimacy in your marriage. What would you say to people who are looking for that thrill, or aren't convinced that this more narrow definition of intimacy will ignite a marriage that is going to work and go the mile?
Well, it depends on what you think ignited means. For a teenager, it has a completely different meaning than for someone who is more mature, and particularly someone who has been married. It's a whole different experience. The fact is, whether we like it or not, the fact is that sex is failing. It's losing its appeal. Statistically, couples, healthy couples, are intimate maybe once a month. That's the average couple in the United States, whether they're married or not. Once a month. What's going on? Why is everybody on Viagra? Why do we need all these conversations? It is so natural. It is so simple. The birds and the bees figured it out, and we have to read books and get counseling. And it's because sex is not what it's about. That has been fake news. That has been misleading. We don't crave sex. We crave closeness. We don't need more pleasure. We're overdosed on pleasure more than any previous generation. We need closeness, and it's not happening because sex does not bring you together. Sex actually separates people because you're never so alone as when you're having sex. That's why you have to ask, how was it? As if you weren't even there. So we have to understand the difference between sexual pleasure and intimate satisfaction and contentment. Sex does not bring contentment. It does not bring satisfaction. It's like junk food. You eat it, you enjoy it, but you never stop being hungry because it doesn't satisfy any need. It's just an indulgence. So if you think that having good intimacy means great sex, you're confused. Intimacy means two people with nothing keeping them apart. Not even the performance of sexual acrobatics. So unfortunately, sex used to be intimacy, but now they're two very different things. Sex keeps you apart. It diminishes you. It needs justification. That's why we call it making love, as if that justifies it. Intimacy, on the other hand, is a real human need, as important as food, maybe more important. Because to be completely alone in the world is just not livable. We can't do it. So we're having lots of pleasure, but we're also the loneliest generation in memory. Why are we so alone? And I think that this is what we really need to address. Good marriages. Bad marriages means we hate each other. Okay, I understand that. But when you have a good marriage and they both feel alone in the world, oh, now this is getting scary. Because if marriage doesn't take away the feeling of aloneness, what will?
That's very thought-provoking, Rabbi. Ricardo, in your experience, it feels like you went through this pleasure-seeking time that the rabbi described, but it came out on the other end with an incredibly intimate relationship. Can you tell us a little bit more about what made you decide to embark on this, or what was that like firsthand? Was it scary? Was it easy for you to jump in?
Okay, I'll answer that in conjunction with the boredom question before. So certainly when I started to get exposed to these ideas, I mean, they were, even though intimacy, like Rabbi Friedman says, is something that should be very natural. It's not a strange idea. You know, everybody wants to be connected with their partner. And I would say it's something that even as a young person, I always thought that there should be more to this encounter. So the first thing is when people, not you, but people ask me about the boredom part, my first answer is, when you have this mindset, this change of attitude, of mentality, when you understand really what this encounter is all about, then the issue of boredom kind of, goes on the side a little bit. It doesn't become, that's not the main thing anymore. It would be if all you're focused on is sexual pleasure and experiences and, exciting things and whatever, then you're always looking for more and more and more, and eventually it just falls apart. Now, having said that, the Torah also understands that we're human beings. We're not angels. We're not saints. At least I'm not. So the Torah is also very flexible, within limits, as to what the couple can do, during this intimate encounter. And that was also good to hear, even though the film, we had to make all these decisions when we made the film. How much information do you put in an hour and a half? So we decided to present the ideal situation. This is the ideal way to reach intimacy, but there's a lot of leeway in some of these areas, which we just couldn't mention in the film. It's too much information, but that's the truth. And so obviously everybody needs to talk to their guide or rabbi about the specifics of that. But for those who are maybe starting, or for those who are having a little more difficult time reaching this experience of intimacy, then the Torah understands that, if you will. It allows for that as you grow into the pursuit of intimacy. But I will also say that, and obviously I'm not saying that pleasure is not important. It is. It's part of the experience. But I do need to add that as the years go by and you're more and more focused on reaching intimacy, then these other things that you were concerned about before, they become less important. Let's put it that way. So suddenly the question of boredom is not really a question anymore. Now you're focused on something else. You've added a new dimension to the relationship. And that's what happens over time if you follow this path.
Now, Bari, one of the questions relates to this. It's a woman who is searching for this higher intimacy, who's seeking this deep level of connection. And she talks about having been on a date recently, and a man said something along the lines to her of, he wants romance. And she's asking what might have been a more meaningful response when we consider these teachings.
So it really needs to be about conscious dating. And the foundation of conscious dating is really knowing yourself, understanding your vision, your values, your emotional needs, how the things from the past affect you in the present. So if someone is saying they're looking for romance, that's just one aspect. Back to the soulmate question, is people ask me that all the time. Do you think there's one soulmate or many soulmates? And at the end of the day, your soulmate is the person with whom everything aligns, right? Emotionally, spiritually, where you have meaningful conversations, where nothing is withheld. And that comes from a strength and a clarity from within. So it's the paradigm of going from unconscious, like, do I like you? And do I want to impress you? And what are we going to be doing? Where you're kind of withheld, to a place of dating from a place of wholeness. And when you're having meaningful conversations about your vision from the very first phone call, and you're dating people that are on the same page, that are ready and healthy and marriage-minded, that romantic aspect is just a piece of it, because there is that intimate connection. We are feeling it like, wow, we want the same things. I love how I feel when I'm with you, because we know how we want to feel. So the idea of romance, that aspect, is to really talk about what that looks like and what you need and what you prefer. And what does romance look like? Because romance is, again, it's about a connection where you're both, where it deepens. So, yeah.
And Bari, building on that, do you feel that it's important for couples to wait to be intimate until they're married if they're having this marriage mindset, or not, and why?
So my position on that with all of my clients and all of the singles is this: intimacy, physical intimacy, is sacred. And until there is caring and commitment, and I mean real caring and commitment, that you're on the same page, that you know that you want the same things, that you spent the time having meaningful conversations, seeing how you show up for each other, I say absolutely to wait, whether you're secular or you're religious, because, women, if we sleep with someone, we fall in love, we feel this connection. And for men, it's a little bit different. So if someone is for you and you're dating in a very conscious way, and you share that there's time for the physical intimacy, there's plenty of time. If we're for each other, then there's time. So yes, I would say definitely wait. And if someone doesn't like that or doesn't want to wait, then that's not your soulmate. That's not your person, because your person is going to want to give to you. They're going to want to be there for you. They're going to want to make you happy. And that really should align, that time frame. And it should be talked about. So yeah, definitely protect that.
Beautiful. And once we are married, Rabbi Friedman, one of our guests is asking, what are some quick tips, practical ways to start growing intimacy in a marriage today? What would be your first step?
I think the first step is that we have to define all of these terms. What exactly is love? What exactly is romance? What exactly is sex? What exactly is intimacy? What exactly is marriage? Marriage is a very idealistic concept. You cannot be selfish and idealistic at the same time. If it's all about me, then just stay by yourself and enjoy me. Don't bring somebody else into your ego. That's abuse. So if you're busy with yourself, and if you're thinking only about yourself and just your own pleasure and your own satisfaction and your own opinion about things, then you're very good single. Stay that way.
Right.
If you're going to get married, it has to be idealistic, which means you want to do marriage properly, not selfishly. Not whatever works for me. That you can't have two people doing that unless you compromise. You're both selfish, you both want what you want, but in order to keep peace, you'll compromise. That can last for about an hour. You can't live a compromise. Right? So the question is, what is marriage supposed to be? And all we're focusing on is what I want marriage to be. For me, my needs, my feelings, So we've got to get past the me monster, at least a little bit, before you can even think of getting married. So marriage should be an idealistic project. How do we get this thing right? Not I want, you want. We all know what we want. You don't need to be married for that. Marriage should be an idealistic, very noble, and very selfless activity. Whereas dating, by its very nature, has to be selfish. You're going to choose who to marry. That's a selfish decision. But once you choose who you're going to marry, you got to switch off the selfish and tune into the idealistic. So we got way too much, too much attention on, am I getting satisfied? Am I getting what I want? Am I getting my fantasies fulfilled? You don't need marriage for that. So the first question is, why are you getting married? What does marriage mean? Is it good to be alone? One of the previous questions was, I like being alone. I like being strong. I like being independent. I like being self-sufficient. Anything wrong with that? Yes, there's something wrong with that. Because being self-sufficient is not sufficient. Just because you can fry an egg and parallel park doesn't mean you don't need someone in your life. Having someone in your life is not a dependency or a need or an incapacity. I can't do laundry, so I'm going to have to marry somebody who can. If you're absolutely perfect, do you still need to get married? The answer is yes. God created the world. Certainly, he is perfect. He was perfect. He was perfect before we made him crazy. But when he created the world, he was already perfect. And yet, he says it's not good to be alone. And so he created us to have a relationship. So really, you have to be perfect before you get married, not in, you don't get married in order to become perfect. To be perfect means it's not about me anymore. I gave it the best years of my life, 25 years of me, enough. I'm not impressed when I look in the mirror anymore. It's the same face for 25 years. It's time to move on. I got to get a new face in my life. That's why you get married. You get married because being you is not enough. No matter how brilliant, no matter how capable, and no matter how perfect you are. Just you, that's sterile. There is no goodness to that. If you're perfectly capable, totally independent, is that good or is that just efficient? There's nothing good about it. Goodness begins when you bring another person into your life, or more than one person, a whole family. Goodness grows with your extending yourself beyond yourself. Even God found no goodness in being perfect, infinite, eternal, all-knowing, all-powerful. Anything good about that? No. It's impressive. It's not good. There's no goodness. So why do you get married? To not be just you. And the funny thing is, after 2 weeks of marriage, people are complaining. I don't feel like I can be myself. Well, if you got married to be yourself, you're confused.
Rabbi, that relates a lot to a premise that you talked about toward the end of the film about how marriage and intimacy really lay a foundation for parenting. In the pandemic world, a lot of us are juggling homeschool and with our kids all the time, like you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation. How do we think about intimacy as a gateway to reframe how we've been thinking about parenting and expanding our families?
Well, many people discovered couples who were literally on the verge of divorce, and because of the lockdown, they discovered an appreciation. They really appreciated the fact that they had someone in their lives. And they never appreciated it before. Before, it was a contest. What can I do for you? What can you do for me? Who's getting more benefits? I think I love you more than you love me. And it was all very, very pornographic, meaning not personal. It was not personal. Everything was objectified. Once they found themselves locked together with no particular ulterior motive, they were just locked in the house, they realized that they really appreciate having each other. It moved them past the pornographic into the intimate. So the film is very timely because the society is going through this convulsion of enough with the sex, where is the intimacy? Even teenagers, it could be scary. Even teenagers are bored with sex. They've had it. They're done with it. They're not interested. They're already looking for alternatives. So it's not that sex is pleasurable and intimacy is serious and heavy. Intimacy is the pleasure you're looking for. The pleasure of sex is like pleasure from junk food. The pleasure of intimacy is like pleasure from satisfying nutritional food. It's the real pleasure, not less pleasure. So I think the pandemic actually forced us, along with the Me Too movement, these two influences made us realize that we have diminished our sexuality to meaningless activity. In the 60s, we all decided that it should be free love. We decided that sex was too meaningful, too serious, too deep, too emotional, too intimate. We wanted recreational sex, free love, free of commitment, free of meaning, free of emotional attachment, and free of intimacy. And now we're so confused. So a man approaches a woman and does something inappropriate, and the woman objects, and the man says, whoa, whoa, whoa. Aren't we supposed to be having fun? Why are you getting so serious? You're offended? We were having fun. Oh, it's not fun. You can't fool Mother Nature. So now we need to redefine human relationships. We got to stop abusing each other. And even good marriages are abusive if you're using the marriage to improve yourself. You're using someone. That's abuse. That's not nice. Either give or receive. Don't use each other. That's deep.
And one of the questions as you were speaking, Rabbi, that came in, and I think Carolina, maybe you would be the best person to answer this, is this ideal of marriage sounds great, but I'm really burnt out right now, and my partner is burnt out with the pandemic. How can we even start to do this right now? What would you say to that?
Around experiencing burnout, I think there's a lot of reasons around that. So in experiencing burnout together, okay, it allows both individuals and that relationship to really start talking about perhaps some of the things that led them to burnout. again, what from a place of self-love and from a loving place, not necessarily from a place of blame or criticism, where this way they could even take turns being able to talk about what has led them to feeling burned out. So they could start becoming aware of it, but also learning how to be able to validate each other through the process of what's led them to that burnout. I think that when you're able to start feeling heard and validated, you start also experiencing a healing process. So when couples come together to being able to hold space for each other, where they take turns listening to each other. And one of the exercises that I would suggest or recommend is maybe even what's called mirroring, where you're verbalizing back to your partner what you're hearing them say. And then as you're verbalizing back, you're also asking if there is more, or if you got that right, because this will allow the other to continue to share what they've been experiencing through the process, but perhaps never did talk about it, or if they did, they never felt heard or they never felt validated. And so when you're at that point of burnout, you want to be able to go back to start talking about these things that led to that point without just dismissing it and moving forward, because it's things that just continue to kind of just keep the relationship stagnant in some ways. So we have to learn to talk about things.
Can the questioner be a little more specific about what burnout means? What are we talking about? What burnout? What does that mean? It can mean so many different things to so many different people. What kind of burnout? You're giving up on your expectations? You just don't want to be nice anymore? What's the burnout?
Well, Carolina, maybe you could piggyback as well with lots of us working from home or spending time with our partners, maybe more time than we ever had in the past. Are there topics that are emerging in your practice more and more frequently, to Rabbi's point, around burnout? Or are you seeing any trends emerging through the pandemic with your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So burnout, I do agree with Rabbi where there is just burnout is so broad. But I am seeing that there are the symptoms that continue to surface, and symptoms are anywhere from the increase of calls that we're getting about affairs, and there's different affairs that happen, or about sexless marriages or conflict, difficulty communicating. And these are all a lot more of the calls that we've been getting. And basically within, these are all symptoms of some of the sameness that's at the core. And at the core, there is just individuals that haven't known how to talk about things, that haven't known how to express to one another their innermost selves. And what I've noticed is that basically a lot of couples have been living parallel lives without necessarily even being aware of it. And so through the pandemic, as they are now having to realize that they're sharing lives, and it's brought them to greater levels of consciousness, of facing each other. And along with, I think through the pandemic, it brought us to some existential questioning of if my life is short, or I don't know for how long I'm going to be living, do I want to be living with this person? And how have I been living with this person? Is this the way I want to continue to live with this person? So it's taken individuals and couples to deeper levels of questioning how they've been living in their partnerships. And with that, I find, for example, that in the sexless marriages, sometimes couples define how good their relationship is based on how often they might be having sex, but that's not really a true measure of the level of intimacy they may be having. Because I also do see that a lot of couples sometimes may have sex as a way to say, okay, we're doing this and we are together as we're still having parallel lives, but we're still not necessarily having that deeper level of connection that we're needing to have. So like at the end of the day, I find that the deeper core, when we stop looking at just the symptoms of what we might see on the surface, but say, where did this begin? What's been going on that led to a sexless marriage? Or what's been going on within that's led to an affair? Or what's been going on within that's been leading to perhaps this difficulty communicating, and about what? So it's being able to get to those core issues and learning how to talk about them.
I think related to that, Ricardo, one of the questions was, and we'd love to have your firsthand perspective of how you did it. But the question is, how do I help either me or my partner be more in tune to the needs of the other? And I think that's really touching on creating that intimacy and taking the self out of it to create a more holistic union. What was your experience?
Sorry, the question is, can you ask the question again?
How do we, whichever partner, she says one or the other partner, learn to be more in tune with the other's needs?
Okay. Sounds more like a question for Rabbi Friedman or Carolina, but I'll try to answer it from a personal point of view. Well, first of all, in the process of becoming more observant in general, I'll start with that, whether it's intimacy or the food you eat or whether you keep Shabbat or not, etc. There's always going to be, or usually going to be, different speeds. One of the partners wants to go faster or wants to, implement more things than the other. And so that can create some important differences in the process. And I would say one of the things that we've learned is to be, well, in my case, that I've learned is to be more or very patient with my wife. In general, I was always trying to go a little faster than her on implementing some of these things, and she wasn't so ready with some of them. We discuss, that in the film. So I would say, first of all, be patient with your partner, be understanding. The process that you're going through is not necessarily what she or he is going through. The fact that you have perceived something or grasped an idea or even experienced something, that's you. That doesn't mean that your partner is there as well. And so that's one thing. And the other thing, like Carolina said, is the conversation is important. I mean, you have to talk. If something is not going right, and sometimes this is very difficult. To talk about these things, but you have to do it. You have to do it, and tell me what's happening. Why are you uncomfortable? That communication, whether it's one-on-one or whether there's a therapist in the middle who's helping, or a rabbi or a rebbitzin, which is a female rabbi, it's important to get that out there. And so that, but what happens over time, if you both agree that where you want to reach, where you want to go, if you both agree on the path, then eventually it works out. If you don't agree on what the objective is, and one wants to go one way and the other a different way, then it's a recipe for trouble, So the hope is that over time, couples do become more in sync. We have over the years. I mean, it was not easy at the beginning. It's definitely much better now, and it's been this process again of patience, of communication, of being empathetic to the other side, and of praying to God a lot. You know, you have to ask God to help you through this whole process. Otherwise, if it's only you and her, two human beings trying to work this out without God's help, it's very difficult. So, you know, we become believers, if you will, over time as well.
Thank you, Ricardo. Barry, if you could jump in there, some of our single attendees are asking, how does this idea of being in tune and listening to your partner impact maybe how you choose a spouse or create a deeper relationship?
Right. So that speaks to the foundation of what I believe creates a conscious relationship. Now, I've been in both situations. So I believe that to find the one, you need to be the one. And what that really means is you need to know who you are and when the past is kind of knocking on your door. So when we're dating in an unconscious way, let's say we come from a home where the modeling, where mom was critical. Then when we're dating unconsciously, we're unconsciously magnetizing and dating people who are going to criticize us or who can't meet our needs. Like if we're afraid of being hurt, you know, then we date or even marry someone who will hurt us. So when we're dating in a conscious way and we're being the one and we're having these meaningful conversations and we're in our wholeness, then we're sharing, we're asking, we're talking about everything. We're making a plan. You could know more in one phone conversation than a lot of people know who are married to each other. So when you're in a conscious relationship that can be recreated in a marriage, I'm married now 16 years, and my husband is a soulmate in every sense of the word, because he is so 1,000% committed to the relationship, to my happiness, to our happiness, to promoting each other. And from the beginning, it was a life plan conversation. So through the ups and downs of life, his mindset and my mindset is this good for him? Is this good for us? So it's kind of like this idea of being bored or falling off. It's like Rabbi Friedman said, this is your wife, this is your husband. So we need to remain conscious in communication, always talking, always planning, no matter what. We can't lose that connection because it's built on a strong foundation. So we're always checking in, and we always want to be in communication and in very high vibration for the sake of each other. Right? We're best friends. We're soulmates and we're goalmates. So that's how I see it, that if we're in a marriage and we're not fully alive and we're not fully connected, then we need to look in the mirror and get connected and re-enroll that person in, you know, this is your husband, this is your wife, this is the person that is the one person on the planet that is that soul connection. So in other words, we need to make really powerful choices when we're making that decision about whom to marry.
Barry, another question just came in that I think is a great piggyback on this that I'd like you to build from. And this person asks, why is it that some people get it right the first time and others don't, maybe leading to divorce or bad coupling? Can you elaborate, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, when we try and compare ourselves to others, you can't do it because you really don't know what's going on in their relationship or in their bedroom. We each have our own unique journey. We have our unique journey. And we also have different backgrounds, different modeling. Sometimes we could look at families of origin and it looks like, oh, they come from a perfect family. But when we look under the surface and you talk to those people, while things might look fine on the outside, on the inside, a lot of times there was a lot of trauma and you don't see it. So whether it's, the time is basically now for each of us to choose connection, to choose to find someone who is going to be right for us, and having that wisdom that it really doesn't matter. Even in a marriage, there's always those challenges and those places where we need to grow together. And so I would say now's the time. Like, we each have our own journey. Yeah.
You know,
Thank you, Bari.
if we keep it really, really simple, and there's nothing wrong with keeping it really, really simple. A husband comes to me and says, I'm not happy in my marriage. My reaction is, oh, your poor wife. This is not your problem. This is her problem. What do you mean you're not happy? What do you mean you're burnt out? You gave up on the plan of getting what you want from your wife? The simple solution is you're there to be kind to her. You're there to be good. You never get burnt out by being good. There's never enough good. So what does that mean, I'm burnt out? It means you've been trying to do the wrong thing. You want to improve your marriage? You want to make it more intimate? Start being nice. Be nice. Don't wait for her to ask for a favor. Don't wait for your husband to ask. Think when he's not home or when she's not home. What can I do for her? How do I make her life a little easier? How do I make her a little more content with her tasks, with her difficulties, her challenges? You're there to ease each other's life, not to burden each other with demands and expectations and selfishness. So really, one person can make the marriage better solo. You don't have to have cooperation. Well, I'm willing, but she's not. I'm ready, but he doesn't want. If you become nicer, you become kinder, and you become more respectful, you have a whole different relationship. Guaranteed. Maybe not within a week, but within a month, absolutely. So, what are you in the marriage for? You're there to get something to make your life more perfect? Yeah, you'll get burnt out because marriage doesn't do that. If you're there to put to action all your positive, good, kind, respectful, and spiritual talents, well, what are you waiting for? Do it. My wife is not happy. Be nicer. Be nicer. Be more thoughtful. Nobody can resist that. And if you can't get to what the issue is, find somebody who can. But don't give up. Your job is to make, the husband's job is to make his wife's life easier and more satisfying. You can't do it? Of course you can. But when you're keeping score, well, a guy actually said to me, I've been nice to my wife for 8 years. What have I got to show for it? What are you supposed to have to show for it? A happy wife. I've been nice to her for 8 years, but she's miserable. Something's not adding up. If you were good to her for 8 years, you have a happy wife. And if she's not happy, what are you not doing? And also, recent statistics show that what holds a marriage together, and I think, just for this point alone, this conversation is worth it. What holds a marriage together is not love. Love is selfish, and love can be very, very destructive. What holds a marriage together is mutual respect. Respect. Because when the respect goes, the love goes. When the respect goes, the decency goes. And it's replaced with contempt. It's ugly, ugly. So respect each other. Stop looking down at each other. I don't do marriage counseling anymore. I will not sit and listen to a husband berate his wife and call her all sorts of names and then have her return the insults, and this is going to bring them together. It's not nice, it's not kosher, and it should never happen. Don't feed all the discontent. You want to make your marriage better, be more respectful. Guaranteed it's going to be better.
Ricardo, in your experience, what have you learned either in making the film or now since you have made the film and gone through the pandemic? How has your relationship grown? What have you learned from these teachings?
Well, as I said before, it's been a process of so far already 15 years. We've definitely grown closer to each other in different levels. Even though this this film and this panel is on intimacy, there's also other areas that have to be worked on outside of that. I'm just saying that intimacy helps to work on the other areas as well. But we've grown also as a family, and I knew this question was coming, so I prepared a little slideshow that I want to share with the audience. If I may, let me share screen, and then I'll show you with pictures and a couple of videos what has happened to us as a couple and as a family since the film came out. Okay, so let me go here. Are you seeing my screen now?
We can see it, yes.
Okay. So in the film, when the film finishes, you see three of these four here. The little one on the right is an addition, thank God, to the family, and they're all a little bigger, now. This is just that's when I was able to carry them all. There's topics that are not in the Lost Key. They will be, God willing, in the Lost Key Part 2, and they have to do with, one of them is with modesty and especially the woman, but the man as well, how you dress. And so we're raising our kids in a modest way, in an observant way. That's my daughter. When she goes to the beach, since she was young, we've already covered her because we want to teach her that her body is a special thing, is a sacred thing, and it's not to be shared in public, but only, eventually when you get married. So they're growing up with these ideas. That's my wife on the left with a friend. This is a program we went to in Venezuela. And my wife also has grown in the modesty area as well. When we were married, she didn't dress as modestly as she does now. Now she's, fully covered up, because eventually she understood the importance of doing it, not only for her and for the relationship, but also for the kids, so they would have a good example at home. Here's just another shot of the type of thing, when a few years ago, we would go to beaches that were mixed, like most people do today, men, women, and the women are, with barely wearing anything. We don't do that anymore. We go to beaches only, either private beaches or special programs where there can be other families, and you can see some of them here on the background there. But where all the women are covered up, and again, because they're covering up the specialness of their bodies. They're meant to be for the husbands, not for the enjoyment of the general public. So this is my wife a couple years ago in Miami when she finally decided to cover her hair with a wig. This is also a topic that is covered on The Lost Key Part 2, which hopefully will come out soon. And I did a video. She didn't know I made this video. She was trying the wig here. Okay, I did ask her if I could show this video, and she said yes. Okay. Fast forward a few years, last year, we decided to come to Israel for my son's bar mitzvah. It was actually my first time ever in Israel. I had intended to come a few times before, and it just never happened. And it finally did happen. Actually, when we reserved our tickets and we were planning everything, I remember, turning to God a few times and saying, please don't cancel this trip. It's okay if you cancel the other ones, but this is my son's bar mitzvah. Let's make sure we're all there. So thank God we made it. This is like the second day we were here. And that's my son. He's in the film. I think in the film, he's like 3 or 4 years old when we showed those shots. He's 13 here. That was last year. And this is another way to show you how we've grown as a family. He wears a hat, which means he's at a certain level of observance and on a certain path, as my wife and I are. That's my wife and I, a few years after the film, a few extra white hairs as well. And as I said before, because of the corona, the day we were going back to Venezuela, it was just meant to be a 2-week trip. They canceled all the flights. And so we, just 1 month, 2 months, 5 months, a year. So we ended up putting our kids here in school. It wasn't part of the plan at all. This is their first day of them getting ready to go to school. That was like last August or September. And here, this is also in Israel, but I'm showing, there's my wife with her hair covered. This was a major, big step for her, a very difficult step for her. But eventually she did it. And, again, that'll be on The Lost Key Part 2. And so covering sometimes means you cover with a kisui, which is this cloth that you see around her head, or with a wig. And actually, Rabbi Friedman explains why women do that in this other film. And that's just a more recent shot of the family here in Jerusalem. And that's me in about 25 years. Okay. So, thank God. I want to always emphasize that it's not Disneyland. I mean, marriage is hard work. At least it's been for us. It's hard work. You have two people from totally different places. Even if you share the same religion and you grew up in the same neighborhood, in the same community, it's still a lot of work. But a lot of these, I think it's thanks to Judaism and thanks to all these Torah ideas that we're together in a strong way today. And I would say as well, some people ask me during the pandemic, for sure, all these things that are in the film and some of these additional topics as well, which are part of our lives, briefly, family purity, modesty, the whole package has definitely helped keep us going in a very strong way. In that sense, when I hear Carolina talking about the types of issues that couples are bringing to her therapy, I feel bad that that's happening. That's a tough situation to be in. But I would say that what helped us get through this in a good way was all these Torah ideas. And finally, I would say, Carolina, maybe here's an idea for your couples. But if a couple has gone sexless, or worse yet, they're having affairs, they're not finding what they need, and they need to restart the whole thing. They need to like have a fresh start. Well, maybe this is a golden opportunity to try something totally new. They can watch the film or get it from you or talk to a rabbi and say, look, try this other way to connect and to be intimate. And maybe that'll take him on a new and renewed and better path. And so, that actually, I would tell that to anybody who comes to me with that type of question. So that's been our journey so far.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Ricardo.
Okay.
While you were speaking, somebody asked, and I think it's a great question for Rabbi Friedman. She said, I'm a divorced Jewish woman, but can oneness and intimacy, like what we're talking about, be achieved with a non-Jewish man, or does the Jewish woman have to be with a Jewish man to achieve this type of connection?
Well, if marriage is a reunion, which means two parts of a single soul that got separated at birth find each other and reunite, well, a Jewish soul and a non-Jewish soul are not the same. So it would not be a reunion. And by strict definition, it would not be a marriage. It would be a union. And it could be a very nice union, but not a reunion. So a real marriage is between two parts of the same soul. If it's Jewish, it has to be two parts of a Jewish soul. If it's non-Jewish, it has to be two parts of a non-Jewish soul. So both for the Jewish partner and for the non-Jewish partner, it's not a reunion. It doesn't have that power. It doesn't have that sense of déjà vu. Oh, here we are again.
That's great. So I guess we're looking for our other half. When we think about Carolina,
Can I correct that?
Two parts.
The
Yeah.
Part. Because if you have a second marriage, that second marriage is another part of that same soul. So souls don't just divide into halves. They divide into parts.
That's a great correction. And we've had actually a couple questions around that that have come in, even when we talked about it a little bit earlier, the idea of can you have more than one marriage or true love? So I think that's excellent. Great question, or clarification, I should say. Carolina, in your opinion, when we're talking about sexuality and spirituality in the same space, how do you recommend couples who have a strong religious background, maybe who feel bashful or guilty about sex and how it relates to intimacy, approach these teachings?
So I do recommend approaching these two with curiosity. That's always helpful because we're either coming from a curious space or a defensive place. And so when we're allowing ourselves to be curious, however, I know that having a curious and open heart can sometimes be difficult when you might be feeling bashful or guilty. So guilt is a feeling that of psychological discomfort about something we've done against our unrealistically high standards. And bashful can sometimes have shame attached to it for individuals. So a lot of my work is basically about helping individuals explore how some emotions may be distressing to them. For example, helping them explore feelings and beliefs without judgment and with curiosity. We have to address the feelings first before even forcing on a new approach, because if not, we may bypass our being and disown certain aspects of ourselves that we still have been carrying around, very much so disowned. And so we want to come from an integrated place. So what I would recommend is pacing yourselves as you approach a new teaching. Talk about them and learn to talk about them. Learn to talk about them. As we learn to talk about our feelings and something new, we also learn to get comfortable with how we feel about things. And I feel that this, the film has brought a lot of awareness to people about having conversations about these topics. And in the mere talking of it, it can be therapeutically healing.
Great. One of the questions also that came up, I think, Carolina, I'd like you to take this one as well, and then I'd like Bari to weigh in. But someone is asking about how to apply these teachings if they've met someone who lives 800 miles away and is in another country.
Yeah, so I think with our virtual ways that we're being able to so easily access today, we're able to have video calls with somebody that's so far away and explore a lot of these things with them. And so since one of the best tools for exploration is communication and talking about things, and I know I continue to really express how important it is talking about things, because when we're not talking about things, we're withholding from our partner or that person we're trying to get to know and allowing them to get to know us. So we're withholding from them and allowing them to get to know us and allowing them to get to know our emotional neighborhood and our spiritual neighborhood and our erotic neighborhood. So we really want to be able to use whatever platforms we have today, and we have just a wealth of platforms, and then being able to really address these things. I would say that the distance really shouldn't be such a problem when I know that there's so many individuals within the same household that are living parallel lives, not necessarily feeling connected. So for connection, even more so nowadays, that connection could be so simple and simply accessed when we really allow ourselves, really shouldn't be an issue.
That's beautiful. Bari, what about you? For folks that may be single, how do you think about long distance as it relates to these teachings?
Okay, sorry, I was muted. So it all comes down to having a plan, and having a vision and being conscious before you date. So when you start dating, there's actually a format of knowing yourself and knowing your values and sharing and asking is what we do with our clients. Now, if someone is 800 miles away, there's the practical aspect of it. Like if we were for each other, like what would that look like? Who would move? Who would move, right? So if someone can't move, then there's no point in moving forward. Once that is worked out, this if we were for each other, then we have meaningful conversations around vision, around values, around goals, about emotional needs, how you feel about the person. And then it comes down to really a plan to use. Of course, they're communicating on video. They're seeing how they show up for each other. And then it's a plan to, if they were for each other, like, when are we going to meet so that they can be meeting in person and having these conversations? I have a client who she was in Phoenix and her brochure was in Cleveland, and they connected because she was open to finding the right person. And on his bookshelf was a book that she said, wow, someone who reads a book like that could be for me. And she happens to be a chaplain, and she's egalitarian, and she's the kinds of a woman who likes to lay in Torah, a special, unique kinds of person. She said, I'll never meet the right person. I doubt I can meet someone like this. And sure enough, through these meaningful conversations with him and how generous and loving and warm he is, their situation in life, they would spend 4 days together, meeting each other, spending time first alone, spending a Shabbat together. He would be at a hotel, they would come together. Then the next time they met each other's families, then she went to him, and they've developed quite the emotionally intimate connection, talking and planning. And he would easily, they're engaged, he's moving to Phoenix. So it's about workability and a plan. So distance does not need to be a problem. We just need to know how to do it, how to navigate.
Plan to succeed, I think they'd say.
Exactly. That's right.
Rabbi, someone just asked, can you talk about the necessity of teaching young people about these intimacy teachings?
It is very, very important to start young. And the younger, the better. How does a young boy or young girl who were told all their lives, all their young lives, that sex is forbidden, you shouldn't be talking about it, you shouldn't be reading about it, you shouldn't be looking at pornography, you shouldn't even be thinking of it. And then all of a sudden they turn a certain age, and now it's holy and it's spiritual and it's godly and it's a big mitzvah. How do they make that adjustment? It seems crazy. Most people simply assume that marriage is license to do all those disgusting things that you're not allowed to do when you're single, which is, of course, terrible. Terrible message, right? If we're raised with this notion that sex is selfish, indulgent, greedy, degrading, disrespectful. We were told when we were in yeshiva, thinking of a girl that you see in school or wherever on the streets in the neighborhood, thinking of a girl in sexual terms is giving yourself license to use her for your entertainment. That's a subtle form of rape. And that made such a strong impression on us. You don't do that to decent girls, even in your mind, right? So if we're told, if we're imbued with this message that it's ugly and it's disgusting and it's animalistic, it's forbidden, or it is selfish, it's greedy, it's grubby, how do you get married? So it's not like you have to rethink it. No, it was not that grubby. It's not that bad. It's beautiful. It's making love. This doesn't work. What we're taught when we're young is that you may not be selfish in intimate areas. You can't use people. You can't look at people like objects or possessions or animals, right? So that which is disgusting will always be disgusting. That which is undignified will always be undignified. What happens in marriage is a completely different thing. It doesn't need to be embellished. It doesn't need to be justified. You don't have to call it making love. It's much better than love. It's intimacy. It is holiness itself. So obviously, you have two sides of every coin. This physical intimacy between a man and a woman can be a very unholy thing because it can also be very holy. So those are the two sides of the coin. So we have to raise children with the concept of modesty. Modesty means respectful, aware that there are borders, my world, your world, my privacy, your privacy. You never violate those things, especially in marriage. So if you can speak about intimacy to children without it being a special, sensitive, dangerous conversation, it's just another part of being Jewish. It's another part of the Torah. There's a mitzvah to eat matzah on Pesach, and there's a mitzvah to dress modestly. It has nothing to do with ugliness or with evil or with... This gives children a vocabulary. If something abusive, if something inappropriate happens, the child has a vocabulary. The child can come home and say, the teacher or the counselor or the whatever was not modest. So the child is not intimidated and frightened by the experience. He knows that it's an immodest thing. And, if somebody gave a child a non-kosher candy, the child wouldn't be traumatized. He would come home and say, Uncle so-and-so doesn't keep kosher. He gave me a non-kosher candy. So when they're still innocent, that's when you have to tell them about the beauty of modesty and the beauty of holiness and the beauty of loyalty and of oneness. This is life. This is not a special subject. The younger, the better, because they're still innocent.
Carolina, how do you feel we can talk to our children about these critical things? What Rabbi is saying is really so powerful. How do we start having these healthy, critical conversations early enough?
Well, look at the components. The components of intimacy. Let's start with respect. When children see their parents treating each other respectfully, that is a very powerful lesson. Probably the most powerful. I can't imagine anything more. Now, people say children should see parents being affectionate, kissing and hugging and... No, because you kiss and hug the child too. That is not a powerful message. But the respect that the children see between husband and wife. A simple practical example. Not calling each other from the other side of the house. If a husband wants to say something to his wife, he should go to where she is and speak like a mensch, not shout from the other side of the house. And certainly not to demand, like, where are you? Get over here. That's the beginning of the end for the children. That is totally inappropriate tone of voice. Even sometimes talking to your children, that's inappropriate, but certainly to each other. So start with respect. Ramp up the respect. Whatever respect you have for each other, improve it from time to time. Think of ways of making the respect even more elegant, more dignified. Don't start eating until your spouse is ready to start eating. Just consideration. Respectful consideration. That's number one. Number two is the modesty. Don't lower your standards with each other. Now, the famous expression that fathers are always saying to their teenage daughters, "Oh, you can't go out dressed like that." No, that's backwards. If you're going to dress like that, go outside, not in the house. Why does the street get more respect than the house? Don't dress like that in the house. This house is a place of modesty. This house is a place of respect. This house is a place of holiness. You want to dress like that? In the streets. The streets are ugly anyway. Who cares? But don't bring that into the house. The same is true with husband and wife. The doorbell rings and the wife decides that she has to get dressed decent to answer the door. But the fact that she's with her husband and not dress decent, that's okay? So the guy delivering the pizza gets more respect than the husband? And the other way around. The guy running around in his underwear? That is so undignified, so non-respectful. You know, if your employer was coming over, you'd get dressed out of respect. So what happened to the respect to each other? So modesty, respect that children see, that sets them on the right path. And then selflessness. We feed our children selfishness. We feed them we teach them to be selfish. We admire their selfishness. This is not a good message. Not a good message. You say to a child, when your friends come over, you should share your toys. That's nice. But don't ruin it by saying, because if you don't share your toys when your friend comes over to your house, then he's not going to share his toys with you when you go over to his house and he has nicer toys. So now you've turned it selfish. Don't ruin it. Teach children to be selfless. And today, children are ready for this message from the time they're 4. Selfless. Children can be selfless. Don't underestimate them. So how do you get children ready for intimacy? Selfless, modest, respectful. Those are the ingredients. When husband and wife go into the bedroom, they have each other. Nothing between them. Nothing comes between them. They have each other. So if they're intimate, it's always perfect. We were together. It's not a performance. It's not a judgment. It's not a skill. It's intimacy. And then you're not alone. Then you stop being alone.
That's powerful. It feels like, gosh, we have so many important things still to learn from you, Rabbi Friedman. I know that you have another class coming up here in just a few moments. So I want to wrap up with one final question, but in case that answer is a little bit longer than your time, we really, really look forward to learning more about these teachings. Thank you so much for your time. And I think as a last question, Ricardo, is it safe to say that we'll be learning more about some of these teachings in the Lost Key Part 2? Can you tell us what we can expect and look forward to? Because I think we all want more.
Thank you. There's so much information and topics to cover that we could probably make a very long Netflix series on the subject. But making each one is a time-consuming and expensive process. So we are working. We have been working on the Lost Key Part 2, which covers basically 2 topics. One is the topic of what we call family purity, which means that the couple during a monthly cycle, they separate for approximately 2 weeks and they get back together for 2 weeks. So we explain how that works, and then how the woman immerses in this ritual bath called the mikveh. And then we also talk a lot about the modesty that Rabbi Friedman was just discussing, especially between the couple, but also with respect to the children. So that's going to be, I would say the Lost Key is a continuation of the Lost Key Part 1. There's some new couples and some new experts in this new film. We ran out of funds a little while ago, and I got involved in some other things, but hopefully I'm going to take it up again soon. And if you just want to sign up to our website, you'll hear about it when it comes out. We also, by the way, Rabbi Friedman and I, we also wrote a book, a companion book to the film which is called The Joy of Intimacy. It's available on Amazon and many other bookstores. Actually, here in Jerusalem, I walked in one of them, and the book was there, and I told the guy, "Hey, I wrote that book." He didn't believe me until I showed the picture on the back of the book. And so there's this book as well, and we also released some extra content, which is on our website, which is called the Lost Key Extras, which is about 40 minutes, and there we delve deeper into some of these ideas, and it's got some interesting interviews as well. So over time, hopefully, we'll keep releasing more and more content, to help people that want to learn more.
Beautiful. We can't wait. Really looking forward to part 2 and beyond.
Thanks.
Thank you, Carolina. Thank you, Bari. Thank you, Rabbi Friedman. Of course, thank you, Ricardo. It's been an amazing conversation. Questions are still coming in, so hopefully we can do something like this again soon. We so appreciate your expertise and your advice, and we look forward to the next time.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, everyone.
Actually, we're going to open up the chat on YouTube. If any of the participants want to say something on the chat, on the public chat, this is the time to do it. Rabbi Friedman has to go, but the rest of us will stick around for a few more minutes. So, Orlando, if you want to go ahead and open the chat, and people can say whatever they want. It's like a final comments and so on. Bye, Rabbi. Nice to see you again.